Welcome back everybody. In this video, we will learn about higher order components. Higher order components are the components which acts like as a functions that take a component and return a new component with newly added functionalities. Higher order components are common pattern in React for reusing components logic. What do you mean by them? You see here, the component logic here where it is trying to increment the count value by 1 whenever the user clicks on the increment button. The similar kind of an logic I try to use in an H over counter as well. You see, the component logical part is the same. Whenever you look at the output for this, I'm clicking on an increment. It's trying to update my counter value. Whenever I hover on my increment button, it is trying to update my value. The logic remains same here. You see the same piece of code in hover counter and also click counter. You are trying to repeat the logic here. We are violating dry rule here. Do not repeat yourself. Here, higher order components comes handy. Higher order component will is a function and takes a component as a input. Let us pass this component as an input to the higher order component. Let me create a component. Let me call that as an HOCEX or HOC. It's up to us the name what you would like to give it to that. Let me call that as an handler, HOC handler or counter handler. Counter handler here is an higher order component. So let me get that part. You see this counter handler. Right? This is a component which takes a component as an input. Let me call that component as an base component or the original component, actual component, whatever name you name it, give it likewise. And try to return a new component here. So what I do, let me create a new component within this const new component where my actual logical part comes into handy. Here, let's create const. Instead of me writing this, let us try to copy this code and let me paste over here. Let me import use state. All right, increment count. It tries to increment the count and return the new increment, new component. All right, this one, this component, no, this is returning the new component. How counter handler is returning the new component. New component should return something. Return the base component which we received along with the props like count equals the count which we have over here and increment count with an functionality over here increment count. All right, so you see counter handler is an higher order component here which takes a component as input and return a new component. We have written the new component here which tries to perform increment on particular values and return with this functionality. All right, now how do I use this now? So to use this in click handler, let me try to comment out this part, copy this, comment out, paste it again. So this, since this logic is already available now, let's try to call upon counter handler. For counter handler, let's try to for counter handler, one second, give me a second. Counter handler, let's import that one. For that counter handler component, let us pass click handler component. we have removed the functionality over here, counting. So that counter handler is passing the count and the increment count functionality as a props. So click counter should receive that as in props. Instead of printing directly count, props.count. Here, props.increment counter. All right. So that is how this should work, please. Let me do with an H over as well. Remove this part. This should receive, one second, copy this. Original one I do not want to disturb. Copy this part, paste it again. The last part, let me comment it here. Call our H over component should be the input to the counter handler. All right. That should return a props there. Let me remove this part. This logical part is handled there, and render that props.count and props.increment count. All right. Let's go back. See this increment and hover. All right. This is how you can make reuse of our any common functionalities throughout different components, then take an advantage of higher order components. I repeat, higher order components are functions that takes a component as an input and returns a new component with uh, added functionalities. By this, you can make use of an code reusability. Now, be careful by using this kind of an higher order components. Imagine when if I'm passing some parameter props over here, props name equals to some KMIT. All right. If I'm passing this, I cannot use this directly. You know, um, whenever you are passing this kind of a name, or else let me pass directly the name. Um, in count click counter, I cannot use this. You see, let me try to print that back. Props dot name or props dot, what was that? Props dot name. I cannot use this part. Let's try to destructure. Why this is why because this component is returning an higher order component, not in general click handler. So this has to be taken to our higher order component. Let me look at the output here. See, it is not rendering that part. So to get that part, let's try to handle that as well. Handle counter handler here. In this part, let's try to, while returning this, let me try to return my props as well. So that props comes to here. Let me pass this as an props. Now that props dot name should destructure here and that should render. Props is not defined in click counter handler, line 11. Click handler. You can pass directly like this, destructure that part, and or see, I did not receive the props here. Props. Let's look into that. It is not rendering. Why so? Let me reload. Yeah, it's rendering. You see, after reloading, it's rendering. All right. So this is how you can destructure the props string. And also, you can have your own logical part for counter handlers. For example, both the logic is taking as in one increment. For example, click counter. I wanted to increment by 5, right? Hover counter, I wanted to increment by 1. All right. So to do that, just pass the value over here while passing. let me pass my click handler should increment by the 10 times, and that should take over here. Here, let me take that as an increment increment number. Increment number. Just replace this one with increment number. All right. So with an hover, let me pass just the one. All right. Let's go back. Check over here. Reload. It's incrementing by 10. When hovering, it's incrementing by 2. So these are the few pitfalls you need to remember while handling with an hover components. All right. So I repeat, higher order components are the functions which takes a component as an parameter as an input and return the new component, this component, with an newly added functionalities. Basically, this newly added functionalities will be the common functionalities between multiple components. This is how it helps us in reusing the components logic. See you in the next video.